How would you get away with murder? It's a question that most people have asked themselves sometime during their lifetime, if only because they watch shows like this one. They hear about other men and women who have spent time planning what they hope to be the perfect crime, only to be caught and then wonder how they would do it better. We have received countless comments of people openly discussing what they would have done and how they would get away with their crimes, and each time, the person assumes that their internet history would not be called into question. They assume that these comments, emails, and posts written on social media discussing these topics would never be found by police, and they would never be caught, which, unsurprisingly, is exactly what Mark Twitchell, Stephen McDaniels, and Corey Richins thought prior to them being arrested for their crimes. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be going over the police interview for Mark Twitchell, more commonly known as the Dexter Copycat Killer. We've covered Mark twice before on the channel, the first when going over his crimes, and the second when reading the fanfiction that he wrote about himself, and how cool he thought he was for being a murderer. Both videos will be linked below, as they provide necessary context. For those of you who have not seen our original coverage of the Dexter Copycat, Mark received that moniker because he watched the television show and immediately declared that he was a sociopath. He believed that being a sociopath meant that he was more intelligent, rational, and better than those around him, and he then attempted to live his life the same way the show's protagonist does. Despite his assertions about his own genius, he was almost immediately caught after his first murder. It wasn't just that Mark had left a deluge of evidence of the crime and had attacked another person prior to that murder, but failed to kill them, but he had also written a Word document titled SK Confessions, where he went into intense detail about his crimes, as well as how he viewed the world and the fact that he had diagnosed himself after watching an HBO show. He also went into intense detail about what he would do if he were ever arrested in the connection to the murders, meaning that what we are about to watch is a very practiced performance by Twitchell. Despite his own self-congratulatory statements about how he was more intelligent than those around him, and of course is one of the most criminally sophisticated killers to ever walk the earth, he's by no means the first person to step inside of an interrogation room with a plan. In fact, he isn't even the first person we've covered to do so. One of our first videos was on Stephen McDaniels, the man who killed Lauren Giddings, and found out that her body had been discovered while doing an interview with the local news station. Stephen had been obsessed with Lauren for a significant amount of time, and had documented his plans, down to what he would do if he was ever brought in for questioning. On a forum, he recounted that he would fake a mental breakdown, becoming despondent for hours at a time and refusing to acknowledge the interrogator. He then wrote that after 12 hours, he would snap out of the trance, feign confusion, and say he had no prior recollection of what happened, also that he could plead insanity. He, like Mark, thought he was so intelligent that he could outsmart the justice system, and that even in the off chance that his crimes would be pinned on him, he could find a way to avoid any harsh punishment. But, just like Mark, his public documentation of his plans would ultimately lead to his own downfall. In today's video, we're going to see just how well Mark's plan panned out, and if he actually is the world-class manipulator that he claims to be. The interrogation footage was made public by the Edmonton Sun, and the original uploads will be linked in the description box down below, should you want to see the raw interrogation for yourself. Because we are adding commentary, this video falls under fair use, and should not be subject to copyright claims, strikes, or takedowns. With all of that said, let us begin. For ease of understanding, the following is a very abridged version of Mark Twitchell's life and crimes. Mark was described by all who knew him as having an intense ego and a propensity for lying, which often led him into trouble. Because he didn't see the value in most other people, he had no moral qualms about peddling falsehoods. In his young adult life, he would often bounce from girlfriend to girlfriend, telling them whatever they wanted to hear, just so he could sleep with them, then cheating on them simply because he could. His relationships tended to be short-lived, unless they served an ulterior purpose, like when he married an American woman in 2001 in order to stay in the US. In 2005, his first wife would divorce him, citing irreconcilable differences, only going further to claim that Mark had lied about who he was throughout the relationship in order to get what he wanted, and had cheated on her the entire time. He would then meet and marry his second wife, Jess. In the document SK Confessions, Mark would state that he married Jess and got her pregnant in order to appear more, quote, normal to those around him, and ultimately felt that she held him back from his real potential. The main issue in their marriage was that Jess felt that they needed to make more money in order to provide a safe environment for their burgeoning family, while Mark wanted to pretend to be a real director by making Star Wars fan films that would never see the light of day. Shortly after watching Dexter, Mark truly felt seen by the fictional killer. He had always struggled to see other people as being important as he was, and after watching the first couple episodes, decided that he would live his life just like Dexter Morgan. He then quit his job without telling his wife, rented out a small detached garage in a seedier part of town, and began telling those around him that he was going to use this space to make a slasher movie. However, that was just a cover story. His plan was to lure lonely men that he catfished to the garage, then attack them and kill them, then use the information that they gave him to steal their money and valuables without being caught. His first attempt happened early October 2008 with Gail Tetrold. Gail thought he was meeting a young woman by the name of Sheena for a date. She told him to meet her inside the garage. But when he entered, he was immediately grabbed from behind and shocked with a stun baton. The attacker then pulled out a gun and ordered Tetrold to lay on the ground. Gill would recall that as the attacker attempted to restrain him, he realized that he was in mortal peril. He said, quote, "If I'm going to die, I'd rather go out my way than his way," and immediately got up, ripped the duct tape off of his eyes, and lunged at the attacker. Through the fight, Gill realized that the gun that he had been subdued with was fake, and that it had been a prop to gain the upper hand by the attacker. After a violent struggle, Gill was able to escape from the garage, leaving Mark to stew in a panic. Mark had thought that he had contrived the perfect crime, and almost everything had gone wrong. Even in his diary entry, he was unable to make the failed plot sound as cool as he had hoped. He would send a threatening message to Gill before shutting down the fake account he had made. However, despite the violent assault, Gill wouldn't report the event to the police. He felt embarrassed over the entire ordeal and tried to put it behind him. However, mere days later, Johnny Altinger would fall victim to the same scheme, only he would perish at Mark's hands. Johnny had met Mark via Plenty of Fish, and would tell his friends about his plans to meet the woman before going on the date. He sent the directions that she had given him to them, but was otherwise excited to get to meet her. But his friends would never hear from him again. 3 days after the date, his friends, co-workers, and boss would all receive an email stating that he had met a, quote, extraordinary woman, who was taking him on a long, extended vacation for the next few months. Mark had hoped that John's friends would simply take the message as fact, without asking any follow-up questions, but instead, they immediately informed the police and gave them all the information they had, including the directions leading straight to Mark Twitchell's murder garage. From the moment the police began their investigation, they were aware of Mark Twitchell. Despite his belief that he was a criminal mastermind who could outsmart anyone, they were quickly able to narrow their focus onto him, and he would be brought into the police station for his first interview 9 days after the murder. In SK Confessions, Mark wrote about how he would react if he were to find the police at his doorstep in conjunction with the crime in order to appear more innocent. He wrote, quote, "I would rush the door in a panic, and upon entering or being stopped by patrolmen, I would appear utterly surprised and beg them to know if anything had happened to my precious wife and or daughter. Oh, no." My genuine shock of their presence would start me on the innocent path in their eyes, and then my cover story of being at a therapy appointment would become my short-term alibi, until I confessed to the cops later that therapy was just a cover story that I gave my wife, so I could have just one night of the week to myself. Between that and the total lack of hard evidence, I would be free regardless. It should be noted that Mark did not clean up the evidence of the murder in the garage, as the murder weapon, Johnny's blood, and the laptop that he wrote, then deleted the SK Confessions document were all found in the garage. The only way Mark had attempted to cover his tracks was by deleting the profile he had used to catfish Johnny, and then deleting SK Confessions, although it was immediately recovered. But if Mark's own statements about his intelligence are to be believed, then everything we are about to watch is extremely considered. He has gone over exactly what he's going to say and do in this situation, so let's see if it makes him look guilty or not. Mark appears completely uninterested in his current circumstance, which is odd, given that he has just been asked to speak to the police at the station after they linked his rental property to a recent disappearance. But put yourself in his shoes, and imagine that if you rented a small Airbnb for the weekend. It was just a small getaway, nothing too massive. But nearly 2 weeks after spending the weekend there, the police show up at your home and tell you that when you were there, a crime was committed. A person disappeared after being sent to the rental, and you are being looked at as a suspect. Even if you were completely innocent, if you knew that you didn't do anything wrong and that you will be exonerated from any suspicion, that situation would no doubt bring unnecessary stress into your life. While you would hope that everything goes well, there is probably some worry that you'll be unfairly penalized, or the police could potentially bring a false case against you. Being brought in to speak to the police, no matter the reason, is a deeply stressful situation, so his leisurely demeanor is atypical for an innocent party. However, this is a response we have seen in multiple guilty parties when they are questioned. There is debate as to why suspects will try to appear nonplussed when they are brought in, but most theorize that they actually want to speak to the police, if only to see what they know. They don't want to draw too much attention to themselves by refusing to help or demanding to speak to a lawyer. And most of these men and women believe that if they can insert themselves into the investigation in some way, then they can direct the police's attention away from themselves, which is very rarely the case. The vast majority of these men and women also seem to buy into the media's portrayal of criminal investigations, that being that by asking for a lawyer or refusing to speak to the police, that is an admittance of guilt, which is not the case. It's always in your best interest to have a lawyer present when you speak to the police, as that lawyer will be looking out for your best interest. But because these people are so concerned with looking innocent, they will refuse that lifeline. And based off of Mark's writing, he spent a significant amount of time fantasizing about what he would do in this situation. So him walking into the room lackadaisically, dramatically rolling his head to the side and appearing entirely unbothered is a very considered act.
Okay, Mark. Now, just to go through things, like I mentioned to you that I'm going to do a taped interview with you and stuff. Okay. There's my ID. Okay, so I'm Detective Mike Tabler, Police Service. And I'm here to talk to you tonight because of the fact that you happen to be the renter of a garage that has come to our attention due to a missing person. Okay? Now, first of all, can you please state your name for me?
Mark Twitchell.
And it's Twitchell?
Correct.
Okay. Your date of birth, sir?
July 4th, 79.
4th of July, 79?
Yeah.
Okay, and your address at home?
Is 30 Dayton Crescent.
30 Dayton?
Yeah, D-A-Y-T-O-N.
Okay. In
St. Albert.
St. Albert? Okay. And postcode there?
T8N4X4.
Okay, phone number at home?
780-977-7840.
Okay. Yourself?
Same thing.
Pardon me?
It's the same number.
Same number?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. No landline at all?
No, I use cell and paper landline just for cost and convenience, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good enough. And, okay. Now, the garage in question that we're talking about tonight, can you tell me the address of that place?
5712 40th Avenue.
5712 40th Avenue. And when did you rent that garage?
I began renting it on September 1st.
Okay. And you rented it September 1st?
Mm-hmm.
And who'd you rent it from?
A company called Kirkside Real Estate.
Kirkside?
Kirkside, all one word, yeah.
Okay. And you got the only key to, or was it one or two
There's
keys?
2 keys.
Okay. So you got 2 keys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And where are those keys now?
You guys have the one that I had.
Okay.
And the other one, the last I heard of, is with one of my production assistants, Mike Young.
Pausing for just a moment, but this is not a smart thing to say, because what he is essentially admitting is that there are only 2 keys to the garage, and therefore there are only 2 people who could have used said garage to kill Johnny and attack Gil, him or his production assistant. Again, we know that Mark planned what he was going to say during this interview. We know he believed that he was going to outsmart the police, and that he would be able to redirect their investigation away from him, but he has already stumbled over the starting line. A much better answer would be that he doesn't know how many keys there are for that garage, that he was only given 2, and then lost one shortly after renting. That would mean that it's plausible that someone else, a stranger, could have found the key and used the garage without him knowing. He could go further to claim that items that were in the garage were moved, or went missing, but he just assumed someone from his production team took them. Usually, we wouldn't spend so much time going over how to amp up criminal lies, but we know for a fact that Mark spent time planning what he would do if confronted by the police. so it only feels right to point out that he is doing a terrible job.
Mike Young, one of your production assistants. Okay. And he is an assistant to you, but he didn't rent the garage, it's yours, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And you pay for it?
Yeah.
For the rental?
Mhm.
Okay. Now I understand that you're doing this with a company and you're doing some other things.
Yeah.
So you personally rented it on behalf of the company.
Right.
And what do you call your company?
Express Entertainment.
Express Entertainment,
Yeah.
okay. And I understand you're filming and stuff like that there.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was the purpose of getting the facility.
Yeah.
Mike Young is one of your assistants and he has the other key?
Yeah.
Okay. And there are no other keys out for that garage anywhere?
Not as I know.
Okay. Now, the locks on the garage,
Mhm.
can you describe them? Now, I know there's 2 overhead doors and 1 pedestrian door on this garage.
Yes.
The 2 overhead doors face, I believe it's north,
I think so,
into
yeah.
the alley.
Mhm.
And the pedestrian door faces the house at that address.
Right.
And that would be south. Now, the house is rented by people separate from you
Right.
who have no access to the garage.
Correct.
Okay? And the windows are all blocked and the doors are metal and nobody can see in there.
Right.
And it's nobody's business what goes on in there, that's your...
We block out the lights so that during the day when we're filming and we're trying to create a nighttime atmosphere, that the sunlight doesn't get in our way.
Of course, yeah. Things you have to do with production.
Yeah. We try to control the light as much as possible.
Okay.
So Mark is clearly stressed at this point in time, although he is trying to appear otherwise. His positioning at the table is weird, as he is partially hunched over, with one leg sticking out, and his arm resting uncomfortably on it. It's the kind of position you would see from someone trying to stop themselves from stretching or getting up, and I can guarantee that none of you listening to this now are sitting this way. It isn't comfortable and it's not normal. But more than that, as the interviewer is going over some basic facts about the detached garage, Mark randomly brings up the fact that when he shoots in there, he makes sure to cover the windows and other light sources in order to control the lighting from shot to shot, which not only was not asked, but it isn't even tangentially related to what the police officer was talking about. Because the topic of conversation is stressful, Mark is attempting to sidestep it as much as possible by talking about something he actually enjoys. As we mentioned previously, Mark thought of himself as a filmmaker. He loved the power and control directing gave him, so much so that he founded a fake company, quit his job without telling his wife, and wrote on forums about how he was an up-and-coming director that was making waves in the business, pretending to be a fan of his own work. So from this point on, whenever Mark wants to escape the situation he's found himself in, he will find a way to bring the topic back to the movies he wasn't really making.
So you rented this on the 1st of September, and then you're doing some filming.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what have you been filming there? Have you been filming every day, or what's been going on there?
Nope. Well, most of my stuff is all pre-production. I knew that I was going to use it as a location for filming, so basically I began looking for something that was suitable in like late August.
Yeah.
So found that garage, found that it was an ideal location, it would work great for what our purposes were, and rented it. The only time that we actually spent shooting in that place was the last weekend of September.
The last weekend of September?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had an evening shoot on the Friday, and that was for a couple of hours actually at someone else's house. It was downtown, we shot in our condo. And then all day Saturday is when we used the garage to film.
Okay.
So, sorry, my contacts are...
Yeah.
Anyway. But, yeah, so all day Saturday we used to shoot in that garage area, and then the Sunday in the evening we filmed somewhere else. So, yeah, for that purpose, it was actually just the one day that we were there for actual shooting. Before that, we were in and out throughout the month for production design purposes, which was building our set pieces, getting things set up in there, power, that kind of thing, getting everything ready.
Okay.
So.
Again, there was a shorter, more concise way of saying that, but Mark's goal here isn't to be helpful.
So what type of film is it, that you're shooting at this particular time? That you're talking about shooting at this, what sort of a film is it?
It's a suspense thriller. Actually, it's a short film. The total runtime is only going to be about 8 or 9 minutes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Suspense thriller?
Right.
Okay, and what would you do in a film like this, once you've filmed 8 or 9 minutes?
Go through the editing process. I try to organize it so that it didn't have a lot of effects work to do, so it wouldn't take forever in post-production. But we edit the film together and then submit it to film festivals, try to get it picked up by a distributor. Hopefully somebody will grab it and use it in some way. Or it's also used as pitch material in order to develop a television series or a feature film out of it, to convince someone that, you know, we know what we're doing as filmmakers and that we deserve to get money basically to make more material. So it's all in the interest of developing everyone's career that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just don't understand how that works, and,
Well, you have to start from scratch your own way, because in our industry, there's really only two ways to get in and actually do that kind of work, and one of them is to either pay to go to a film school and then graduate and come out and do it. But usually that path doesn't take you very far. It's kind of like more of the lower end kind of jobs. I'm more interested in writing, producing, and directing, and I've only noticed after the 3 or 4 years that I've been trying to get into the industry that the only way to do it is to make your own stuff, prove that you know what you're doing, and then people start to take you seriously. So I started making, my first film was a feature, a sci-fi fantasy film based on Star Wars content, which is all completely 100% shot now and in post-production. I'm working on a comedy right now, which is it's actually a full-blown feature that's actually going to have a decent budget in the neighborhood of about $3.5 million. And just closing the first round of financing for that at the end of this month. And then we're moving into pre-production so we can finish off like casting A-list actors, getting all that stuff set up, and then preparing to film that sometime in May or April of next year.
Everything he said there is a lie. Mark had not been working in the industry for the past 3 to 4 years. He hadn't learned anything about how said industry worked, and he was not given $3.5 million to make a comedy movie that would eventually star A-list actors. But he is so blasé about these outright lies that it's easy to see why people would fall for them. Mark's work up until this point was entirely theoretical. Although we have found multiple blogs and sites talking about his Star Wars fan film, many of them were paid promotions that he independently seemed to produce, or were outright run by him. The multiple posts from people stating that he had worked on set also appeared to be posts from Mark, as they all contained the same language about how amazing the writer and director are, and how he will be big once his talent is discovered.
Really?
So, yeah, it's been a long process. I started developing Day Players, which is the name of the comedy, back in December of last year. And I kind of put myself through business school in a way to figure out what investors would want to see in order to invest in that kind of project, and built up all my blocks, put all my ducks in a row, and I've just been, I mean, even though working full time and a lot of times during the year in order to pay bills, I've still put in full-time hours into the film to develop it, because I'm just like, tunnel vision.
Oh, yeah.
I want to get a career going. So I got that whole thing developed and going, and pitched it to countless people, playing one side against the other to get talent and money to agree and come to the middle. And now with the economic turbulence in the U.S., it's a little bit tougher. But I've been assured that it's not going to affect our deal or anything like that. So.
Pausing once more to simply point out how Mark lying to the officer in this manner is actually antithetical to his goals. Even though Mark would write about himself as being an incredibly intelligent man, he clearly doesn't think before he speaks. Again, he killed Johnny Atlinger and attacked Gail Tetrold. He barely cleaned up after himself and is being questioned by the police now. Every aspect of what he is saying is going to be looked over by the investigation, and he is spending the first 10 minutes of this interview lying about shit that objectively doesn't matter. He didn't put himself through business school in order to make sure the details of a movie he hadn't written was 100% correct. He didn't work full-time while also putting together a movie that he had no ability to make, and in fact, hadn't worked on in months. He hadn't raised millions of dollars to make a movie from big Hollywood execs and was in the middle of pitching a project to A-list actors. None of that ever happened, and one look through his phone and computer logs would show that. But he simply can't help himself. His ego is so fragile that even in this moment, he has to lie so he can preserve it. When anyone lies as often in their lives the way that Mark does, it's a sign of very poor self-esteem. He is likely a vulnerable narcissist, which means that even though he projects himself as being a confident person, he harbors deep-seated insecurities that are always just under the surface. Being around someone like the police detective, who is competent and can take care of himself, would be agitating for Mark, even if he wasn't being interviewed in connection to the murder. In his mind, because he is deeply insecure about his own abilities, he needs to peacock for the officer, to show off that he is just as, if not more competent than he is. Keep in mind that Mark continues to lie about himself and his abilities. But what are those lies in service of? Because it's not to make his lies seem more truthful. But continuing on.
First round's supposed to be finished at the end of this month, and then sometime within the next 3 or 4 weeks after that, we're getting the full budget in so that we can actually move forward in making this thing. And like my co-producer works out of Los Angeles, and he's done things like Ocean's 11 and Old School, and worked on these things and uses his connections to help us out. And hopefully along those lines, we can try to get a distribution deal with Warner Brothers and skip some of the red tape that usually comes along with trying to go in their front door and get hit by all their gatekeepers, which are designed to keep people out, basically. So it's tough. It's really hard, but it's very worth it. I love what I do.
Yeah.
And
Obviously, you're very passionate about it.
Oh yeah, I love it. I love filmmaking. I figured that out back in 2005 when I first started writing my first script.
Yeah.
And from the first day that I stepped on a set in August of '06, that was when I knew. And then I just there's no going back.
Yeah.
Anything else is crap.
Yeah.
Nothing else would make me feel fulfilled in what I was doing and really love what I do, so I just chased it with everything I had.
Neat. Now, so getting back here, the only person that would have had access is Mike Young or yourself to that place.
Yeah.
Now, tonight you were asked to go down there and meet our constables at
Yes.
the garage, and that's because they were looking for a missing person.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were contacted, you were apparently at home in St. Albert, which is quite a distance from this, and yet you readily responded down to help the police, and we certainly appreciate that. Now, you arrived at the garage and you noted something immediately on your arrival when you went up to the door to show the police the garage.
Yeah.
And what was that?
Well, the first thing that happened, I drove in, I parked in the back where I usually parked. The constable was calling me when I was about a minute out to get there.
Yeah.
And talked to him and said, yeah, so where are you? And he was in the back, so I went to meet him. And one second, I'm not my wife. She's let me keep her.
Oh.
Yeah, that's her. I'll let her leave a voicemail.
All right.
She's gonna be up anyway, so anyway, so I get into the back and I'm like, okay, well, let's go check it out. So I get to the actual gate, side gate there, and they mentioned that it had been blocked off somehow. I didn't know what that was about. I opened it, there was nothing there, so they said, okay, well, I guess it's not. It was a little odd, but went down the side of the garage, came back around, looked at the door itself, and the first thing that I noticed upon looking a little closer at it, because the light wasn't that great, but I could see what was going on, the padlock didn't look familiar to me.
Okay.
And I was the one that actually put the latch on the door, and I had a padlock previously, but it wasn't the same one. The one that I had was like the silver on the outside, like a black plastic dial in the center, and this one was just all metal. So
the audio is hard to make out, but Mark just stated that when he arrived at the garage in order to help the police, there was a new padlock on the door, one that he didn't place on the garage. The purpose of his lie is easy to ascertain, as Mark is trying to put forward the notion that someone else used the garage to lure the missing man, and that if something did happen at his rental property, it has nothing to do with him, which is still borderline nonsensical. But let's run through the series of events. We know that Johnny was lured to the detached garage. We know that there were only 2 keys for the garage, one with Mark and the other with the director of photography. But the notion that Mark is attempting to put forward is that someone else, outside of the production, broke into the garage, used it to lure Johnny out, and then locked up behind them. Why would they do that? Did they decide the garage was theirs now because they put the lock on the door? Are they playing finders keepers rules? Doesn't make any sense. Moreover, this mystery person didn't steal any of his camera equipment that was in the garage, or cause any real damage to the set, and it also just so happened that the set was for a slasher film about a serial killer, and Mark had told neighbors that if they heard screams in the garage, it was just for a movie. So this random kidnapper or killer just happened upon a detached garage, one that was being used for a horror film, and decided to use it to live out their fantasies. That's entirely unbelievable, but so is nearly everything Mark has said thus far. People who lie in the way that Mark does tend to fall into these logical traps often, because they never stay around people who can challenge them. They are quick to discard people who call out their bullshit, and usually stay with people who will give them the benefit of the doubt more often than not. Because we aren't next to Mark, and already know that he is untrustworthy, his lies are easy to spot.
So you noticed a different padlock
Yeah,
and that on the door.
right.
Now, what other locks are there on that door? Can you describe?
There's also a deadbolt.
A deadbolt?
Yeah,
And-
pretty standard lock.
Yeah. And is there another type of lock or handle or?
No, just the doorknob, but I don't think the doorknob locks. I've never tried it, but I don't think it does.
Okay. So regular doorknob, deadbolt, and then a padlock. Okay, and the padlock, was the padlock through, it was through a latch of some sort?
Mhm.
Yeah, that would hold the door, close and lock. And that was the same, but the lock itself was different.
Correct.
Okay. Now, okay, you said that you were there last weekend of September, and that was the only time you were shooting there?
Yeah, that was the only time we had a full crew and cast and
Okay,
filming.
so that's the last weekend of September.
Yep.
And now we're up to the 19th of October here. So that's just about 3 weeks, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you were filming through the weekend then, eh?
Mhm.
Yeah. And we're in the weekend now, so. So just about 3 weeks since and that's the only filming that you've done. Have you been back there since that filming?
Yeah, a couple
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. When was that?
Let's see, I went back, I don't remember the exact date, but I went back one time because we had like a table saw and a bunch of tools that were there, and my dad stores that stuff in his garage, so I told him, you know what, come meet me, we'll load it up and get rid of it. So I went over there and met him after work one day, and he loaded that stuff up and took it home. The next time was when I was taking delivery of a steel drum, I was using this garbage can, basically, so.
Yeah.
Had some issues with them in terms of delivering it. The company kept missing the date or saying that they were gonna be there at a certain time and weren't, and so I was just like frustrated. I called them and said, okay, well, call me like an hour before you get there, we'll meet. So they did, we went to the location, dropped the drum off, so that was that part. And then last Friday
Last Friday.
was when I went there to just clean everything up, get the basic garbage out of there and stuff like that. There was still like a box of bottles and stuff like that, things that had been there previous to me renting the place that I just never got around to getting rid of. But just getting some stuff out of there.
Pausing once again to point out that even though Mark is talking about how he removed things from the garage, he didn't remove the murder weapon. In covering people like Mark, who think they can outsmart the police and commit the perfect crime, this kind of oversight is incredibly common. Because they're in such an addled state, having killed another person, they can't properly focus on their plan. But Mark diagnosed himself as a sociopath. He thought feelings of nervousness, fear, and anxiety were simply beneath him, and he wrote a multi-page essay about how he didn't feel those things, which makes his actions even more nonsensical and stupid.
That was,
When you say last Friday, do you mean the one just passed? And I mean, we're now in Sunday morning, right?
no, it was a week ago.
A week ago.
Yeah.
So, today being the 19th, it would have been like, probably
Twelve.
the 12th.
Wait, no, today's the 19th, today's Sunday, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Friday before this Friday.
So probably about the 10th.
Yeah. So check your calendar.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll let you do that. I don't have a calendar here to do
Calendar.
but the 10th sounds about right.
Yeah, 10th, that's what it was.
Okay. So Friday the 10th, you go down there and clean the place up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the last time you were there?
I think so.
Because I'm wondering if that's when you last saw your padlock on the door.
See, this stuff, it bleeds together, so like,
Okay.
One of my problems is always, I have issues with this, I have also issues with remembering tasks to do, so I live on lists. I try to formulate lists, as long as I have a list and I can check things off as I'm doing them, I'm okay. But, I mean, so I need to stay organized, I'm a procrastinator, stuff like that, so, I think I did drop off, and honestly, I don't remember if it was this past week or the week before it, but I remember dropping off some cleaning materials just for the next time when we were gonna go in there, because my intention again was to pitch this thing and get it into a TV series or a movie. And, the place is so inexpensive to rent, that I figured, you know what, for future episodes, that'd be great to have, so, yeah.
What does it cost?
$175 a month. It's not bad.
$175 a month
Yeah.
for the garage?
Mm-hmm. Looking around prior to that, I was looking at prices of $225, $250 for something similar. So I thought, wow, that's not bad. It's plenty of space, it has power, so we can run all of our cameras and lights and everything off of it. Last time we were there, we had such nightmares. Oh man, like renting just really bad lighting kits that would burn out bulbs all the time and stuff like that. But we never had any issues with the breakers or the power in that place. Everything worked fine, so.
Well, that's all right.
And it's a great workshop too. It's better than trying to borrow other people's places to do stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you're saying that you've worked sometimes full-time and then geared yourself for this. Where do you work when you're working full-time?
I was working basically corporate sales jobs for the most part.
Okay.
You know, it's the kind of thing like when I do work full-time and I work for someone else, I try to find something that I'll enjoy, usually technology related. Like I worked for TELUS selling wireless gear for them, and that was fun.
Yeah.
So I did that stuff. But yeah, something where I can have like a bit of a passion for that and actually feel like what I'm contributing is what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah.
So usually why I work on commission, because I feel like the more work I put in, the more reward I'll get out of it.
Yeah.
And that's usually what I do, so.
Mark had never worked in filmmaking, and his answer here is a lie. Mark's work history was filled with jobs that had nothing to do with his degree, jobs that he took not because he had any interest in them, but because they were the quickest jobs that he could get that required the least from him. Most people don't have the ability to wait for the perfect job opportunity to manifest itself in front of them, because they simply need money to survive. They're only drawing attention to this statement because Mark feels the need to make his job history feel more important. It can't simply be that he worked for a couple of companies to independently fund his movies. It has to be that he picked jobs that he enjoyed as an exploration of his interest, and for further research into that subject matter. It had to serve a bigger and more profound purpose, because he is better than the average person.
Kind of like I've got a really good natural flair for it.
Mm-hmm.
I do that kind of thing if I need to be working or paying bills and that kind of thing. And I'm a little bit more discerning when it comes to that stuff. I try not to get involved in something that I'm only going to be in for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Jobs in the last couple of years that anything where I had to leave or anything like that, it was always just because there wasn't the right fit.
Yeah.
And you usually find that out pretty early on.
Yeah. So you've been working in that type of thing. When was the last time you worked at a job like that?
Last time was the end of May.
End of May. So since then you've been working at getting your production going?
Yeah.
Okay. And your wife, I understand, is employed, but
Yeah.
on maternity leave?
Correct.
Okay, so you've got some income there as a supplement, and where do you get the money from for the production and for the rental and all that sort of stuff?
It's investors.
Investors?
Yeah. What I basically do is sell equity in the film. So if I have a budget worked out, then I need so much money to make the movie. What they do is put that money forward into the film in exchange for percentage of ownership of the project.
Yeah.
So usually we split it 50-50. The production company, that's me making the movie, gets half of ownership of the movie, and the investors putting up the money get the other half.
Okay.
So then once it gets distributed, goes into theaters, gets on home video, starts making money, we split all that 50-50, once we recovered the budget.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then in the meantime, stuff like that takes a year or two at least to come through.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I'm living off of producer fees, which are about 10% of whatever the project is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And who do you have for investors on this film?
At this point, Mark should know that the officer is not asking him this question because he has his own personal interest in what he's saying. Rather, he's asking this question because he is going to follow up with the investors in order to verify what Mark is saying, meaning that if he were to continue to lie, that would make him look guiltier than he already does. If Mark was the master manipulator who could read people like they were children's books, the way he said he was, then he would pivot away from his lies at this point and tell the officer that there aren't any big investors, that he is self-funding the project, and just tells people there are bigger people involved in the hopes that they will be impressed and invest in the project themselves. However, letting go of his lies requires a bit of humility, so let's see what Mark does.
Let's see. Ones that are involved in day players so far. My brother-in-law, Travis Barrish. I got a guy named John Pinsent who has his own chartered accounting company here.
John Vincent, yeah.
And he's a member of the Venture Alberta group, which is a big group of guys who just move money around and invest in different deals and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I first got in touch with them actually it was through the internet, found them online, submitted my materials. Didn't really think I'd get anything out of it, but then I got a call back saying, you know what, you passed deal screening, let's go and present this to like full groups of investors in Edmonton and Calgary. And so I'd make my pitch about the film, and they put some interest in with it. The deal structure underwent a couple of changes throughout the time that it was floating around within their circle. And then when I recently got approved for a gap financing program, I was able to actually offer them a situation where they weren't taking on any risk. It's quite rare for investors, so that looked really good, and that's when everybody was like, oh, okay, I'm in. Because what they're essentially doing is lending us 10% of our budget in the short term in order to get the full one opened in a line of credit, and then when it comes through, when we get our whole budget, those guys get paid back right away. And then we don't miss the money because it comes back to us in the form of an Alberta Film Fund government grant.
Oh, yes. So you have got these investors, and now you've already got this government grant that's come through?
The grant's been approved already. We're a prime candidate because the Alberta Film Fund, they really like Albertan-owned projects, Albertan talent in front and off the screen. They're really, they get involved with that kind of stuff. And I actually know a guy who has a business degree and is really good at writing grant proposals and getting approved for them. Really good track record, who's going to write the proposal for us.
So, two things. First was the fact that the only two investors that he cited were his brother-in-law and a local businessman. Both people had given Mark money in the past, but they were not investing in his movie Day Players, which he at one point said would star Alec Baldwin and John Goodman, so his statement that they had invested in his projects is an outright lie, compounded by the fact that in the first 20 minutes of this interview, Mark had stated he had a bevy of incredibly influential investors in his project. The way he spoke about the movie he was making made it seem like there were actual Hollywood production companies looking into his films, but when actually pressed, the only funding is coming from two guys, who may feel a moral obligation to help him stay afloat. Beyond that, Mark said two ultimately contradictory things in the last 2 minutes. The officer asked him about the grant he claimed to have gotten in order to film the movie in Alberta, to which Mark says he already received the grant, before going into detail about how he knows a guy who is an expert at getting grants approved and how he hopes to utilize him, meaning that he hasn't gotten a grant. Again, Mark's used to people not paying attention to what he's saying. He's used to being surrounded by people who don't know about the movie industry and believe everything he tells them, simply because they don't know otherwise. But now he's in an environment where his words matter, where everything he is saying will be investigated because it's connected to a kidnapping and a murder. He doesn't have the ability to maintain his story from sentence to sentence. But let's continue.
The fact that we're shooting 80% of it in Alberta with very tiny legs out in like LA and New York, it goes to show them that, we're keeping it all in province as much as we can and using as much Albertan talent. In fact, the two leads are Albertan. So we're looking really good on that front. It's just a matter of showing them that we're coming to the table with what we need to make the movie and get it distributed. And then they say, okay, we'll reimburse you for up to 20% of everything you spend inside the province, which for us is a little over $400,000. So if the investors put up the $350,000 to open up our gap, get our budget, and put it in the bank, we pay them back right away. Alberta Film Fund comes in and fills the hole. A lot of homework, a lot of research to get done, but it's a beautiful deal structure. It works for everybody. I'm only giving up 10% more ownership than I would have been getting out there on my own with no back-end support that way.
Yeah.
So the fact that I can get this done a lot faster and a lot easier by using somebody else's credit rating, that's, why not? You know what,
Yeah.
that's fine. It's a matter of kind of time versus ownership, but I'm not gonna sit on this for 5 years and wait for it to happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
These are the goals that are set
Yeah.
up, so. And everybody who's helped me on Star Wars has been so great. Like,
Yeah.
I've got so many people who have donated countless hours of time and energy and resources into that, and they've done it all for free, and I wanna pay them back. I wanna give them a nice, cushy, budgeted project to come in on and work on and get paid on. Get career experience, actually get paid for doing what they were doing before.
Yeah.
Only a little bit less, because instead of having one person do 8 jobs on a no-budget indie,
Yeah.
each person can focus on their one thing on the feature, and we're good, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting how that all comes together.
Can't get me started on this stuff, I can go for hours.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Now, so back again, so we're talking about back at the garage,
Yeah.
and you're saying that the 10th was the last time that you were at the garage.
Yeah.
And you can say that absolutely for sure.
No, it was either a couple of days before or a couple of days after that I dropped off some cleaning stuff. It was like a Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that.
Tuesday or Wednesday, you
Yeah.
dropped off some cleaning stuff.
Yeah.
Now, when's your next plan to shoot there?
Oh, it's not decided yet.
Not decided
Yeah.
yet.
It's still up in the
So
air.
there's nothing planned for that garage.
No.
You live in St. Albert.
Yeah.
You'd be concerned about dropping off a few cleaning supplies there at the garage when nobody else is there, sometime between that weekend, and it had to be done right away.
Well, not necessarily right away. The way that I do it again, it's on a list. So I would have had like a long list of line items of stuff that I'm getting done that day, and it just happened to be one of them. So it's like a stop off, drop it off, and then go.
Now, what sort of cleaning supplies would you have at that place then?
Paper towels, like stain cleaner, gloves, the usual stuff. Just because we deal with this, when you do anything that's involving like suspense thrillers or anything like that, and you want to have something that looks like blood on screen, we use this mix that's like a corn syrup with food coloring in it, because it looks really good on camera, and it has the right consistency and everything, but it's sticky as hell. Gets everywhere, and it's a nightmare. And last time, it got all over the chair, it got all over the floor. It's like ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and that was really my thing, was just because then everybody's grabbing stuff and moving it over, and every time they do, they rub up against it and get it all over their clothes, and it's sticky and annoying. So, it's just a matter of keeping that stuff off of there and clean, and not having to deal with that, because we spend, the problem with an untested effect. This thing where we were, the achieved shot was running a sword through a guy who was sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
And so the way we did it is we just had like the actor sitting in the chair, and then the other actor pretending to hold the sword
Yeah.
in him, and then we go back, lock the camera off, it hasn't moved, shoot this, where we take the same color shirt that the guy in the chair was wearing, put like a Ziploc bag full of this corn syrup there, and then just, boom, put the blade through it so that it comes out with the corn syrup on there dripping, and
Yeah.
then they have to digitally take that, put it onto our original shot so it looks like it's coming through the guy realistically. And it's this complex setup, and we spent like 2-3 hours on that one thing, because we hadn't actually tested it before or set it up
Yeah.
prior.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of like learn trial by fire and figure it out as you're going along, but
Yeah.
it turned out really good. I think it'll look good once it's all done, so.
Mark's answers have very little to do with what is being asked of him, and for good reason. He knows that he didn't clean up the garage enough. He knows that Johnny's blood will be found on the ground, that the murder weapon was left resting next to the door, and the police only need to run a few tests to prove that Johnny was killed in his rental property. And add to that, he just admitted to being the only person who would have visited the garage outside of shooting, and he knows that he probably won't be getting away with his crime. So, in an effort to calm himself down, he's answering questions that haven't been asked. He's talking about how he got certain shots, how he's using practical effects, and the corn syrup mixture that films use for fake blood.
Sounds kind of unique. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's a huge mess too, like, again, you know, you're dripping stuff everywhere, you try to kind of curb that as much as you can, but
Yeah.
it happens, you're walking back and forth and things get moved around, so.
Yeah. Now, so you were doing quite a bit of that sort of stuff in the garage,
Yeah.
that kind of shootings, where there was like blood effect and,
Mhm.
and So what other supplies would you have there that would be needed for that kind of thing?
Oof. Well, it depends what you mean by supplies, because there's supplies and props and a lot of other stuff. A lot of that stuff that's in the garage was there when I rented it. Stuff that I got just for the shoot. There was like this, kit full of knives that we were gonna do. We were gonna do like a reveal shot, show the guy like opening this kit, and it looks all menacing and everything. Kind of put that into a montage. What else? Like the usual duct tape for the guy sitting in the chair, duct taping him up.
Yeah.
There's that stuff. The sword, obviously. Well, there's two swords. One that like looks all glorious and cute on camera, and then the other one that's just a stunt one that's more stain resistant that we use to like dump all the syrup on and everything.
Yeah.
Some clothes, prop, mask, stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it's I'm just thinking about this. I mean, it's kind of odd that you're filming that kind of thing, and we end up drawn to that garage because of a missing person
Yeah.
who supposedly went there.
That's really freaky too, and as soon as they called me on the phone, as soon as Maxwell called me and said that, this is what's going on, I get this weird chill.
So this is the first real confrontation in this interview, and it's done expertly. The officer isn't pressing Mark too hard. He's just pointing out how coincidental and frankly stupid the story Mark is trying to sell is. Because what are the odds that someone, not Mark or anyone affiliated with his production, would just happen upon the garage set where they are shooting a low-budget horror movie with real knives and weapons, then decide to use the set to kill someone? He's letting Mark know, albeit incredibly kindly, that what he is saying doesn't make sense, and is giving Mark an opportunity to revise his story. So let's see what Mark does.
It just doesn't sit right. So the first thing I start asking myself is who all knows about what we do there and what our schedule is like and stuff like that. And if we have a shooting schedule, usually there's a bunch of people in and out of there to prep leading up to it, and then we shoot something there, and then that's it. Until we announce something else, there's no fixed activity.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
So who would have access to it to get things set up?
It'd be me and anybody else that had a key. So basically, for this instance, it was me, Mike, and Jay.
And Jay.
Yeah.
Who's Jay? You've mentioned Mike before.
Mhm.
Jay.
Jason Howitson.
Jason Howitson.
Mm-hmm.
How do you spell his last name?
Howatson.
Okay, Jason Howitson. How old's Jason?
28.
Now, you know him and Mike from before?
Yeah.
How long?
Couple years.
Couple of years? How old's Mike?
I think Mike's turning 30.
30 years. So they would have had access, but the only one that had a key was Mike.
Mm-hmm. Well, passes back and forth between them.
And these two would maybe pass it back and forth.
Yeah. I've been trying to hook up with Mike because I owed those guys like a couple $100 for materials for production design, and we're trying to figure out a time to meet to do that, and also to get the key back from them and stuff like that. And he said, hey, if you're around the south sometime, Saskatchewan Drive, drop by. But he always lets me know basically an hour before the timing would be, and it's too short a notice.
Yeah.
So we've missed each other up until now.
When was that?
Well, I mean today, but we kept just back and forth and missing one another.
Well, you and Mike connected today?
No, but tried to. Not today. The guy operates entirely on text message. There's no actual calling and talking to him. So he'll text me and say, I'm gonna be in St. Albert around this time. If you're gonna be there, I can drop by. And I'll be like, well, no, it's no good. We're gonna be gone, something like that. And
Yeah.
so The last time that I actually talked to him, I think it's the 12th. I was checking before because I've still got some of his incoming text messages. He was, had some powder tickets I was going to sell him.
In the 3 minutes that have elapsed since the initial confrontation, Mark has sighed multiple times. This is often a sign of stress, which makes sense, because the officer is now focusing on the fact that Mark stated that there are only 2 people who have keys to the garage, meaning that there are only 2 people who could have used the rental property to lure Johnny. He has since expanded the list of potential suspects to 3, claiming that the second key would sometimes go between 2 other people, but his story is still unbelievable.
It was on the 15th.
15?
Yeah.
On the 15th, you met with him?
No, just texted back and forth.
Just texted back.
Never actually got back together. No.
Were you on the south side on the 15th?
Calendar again. Might have been. Could have been either the 14th or the 15th.
And what would you have been on the south side for?
That would have been for dropping off the cleaning materials at the garage. It was either then or the week before it, 8th, 7th, 8th, but I can't remember.
And where would you have got these cleaning materials? Like, these sound like something kind of special. Where would you get that?
Well, it's like Home Depot or James
Home
or
Depot.
something like that, yeah.
Well, that's,
We either
it's just regular cleaning shit?
Yeah. We don't need
Okay.
anything that crazy, it's not like.
Well, okay, well, I don't know, you're describing this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's just like, usual stuff, we don't have anything special. The garage is a dirty place anyway, we have no
Yeah.
intention of putting anything cool in there or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, just whatever will get the sticky stuff off or that kind of thing, and
Okay.
that's basically it. Something that, if it's not gonna sit there and smell up the place,
Yeah.
be better.
So, now, you've been told that we're looking for a missing man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you been told his name?
No,
Okay. The name is John
okay.
Altinger. Altinger.
Okay.
Does that name ring a bell to you or mean anything to you?
No.
Never heard it before?
No.
He's nobody that you'd been using as an actor or that maybe Mike or Jason would have been in touch with?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if Mike or Jay know him, but nothing that in terms of casting or production crew or anything like that.
No?
No.
Not a worker, not an employee you've heard about?
No.
No. Now, do you have any girls that are employed by you or that take part in anything? Any of the setup or
Often.
anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a really great actress on this one that we worked with. That was, she came to the condo set on the Friday. Came up from Red Deer. Her name's Katrina.
Katrina?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the most recent.
Okay.
I got some like Facebook buddies too that are all kind of like in the industry and back and forth, and you know, submitting themselves for doing casting calls and things like that. But
Yeah.
nobody that's crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, these Facebook buddies, would they have connected with anybody like this maybe that was just a single guy that maybe attracted him towards this sort of line of work or anything like that?
Maybe, I don't know. Not that I'm aware of, but possibly. I don't.
Okay. Okay, the indications we have, and we've got this through our investigations, and the address comes up, and the garage is described, and he actually says that he was there on that particular day. The particular day we're talking about is I think the 15th.
The 15th, okay.
Now, and I may be mistaken, I may be mixing a couple of things up, but I think the 15th. And that's the day you're indicating that you were probably down there putting supplies there.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Like on Wednesday or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in and around the same sort of time frame that you were there. You like in the afternoon.
Really?
Yeah. And he was supposed to go there and meet a girl who described the address and told him how to get there. Now this is really met through, an internet site.
Okay.
Doesn't know her from before. So he, of course, lets friends know where he's going.
Right, okay.
But go to meet a girl, swear home. Sends it out to a few friends. All of a sudden, he disappears. Last known place was there. Said he went there. Met a guy. The girl wasn't there. Met a guy in the garage.
In the garage?
Apparently.
Okay.
What can you tell me? What does it explain to you? Tell me what you're thinking.
Well,
If you were solely paying attention to the tone that the officer is using in this case, it might surprise you to know that he is actually telling Mark that there is a plethora of evidence against him. He's going over how Mark's story doesn't make sense, how he is likely responsible for Johnny Atlinger's death, and how everything he has said in the nearly 1 hour interview has been bullshit. This might come across as surprising because the officer's tone is so light, it sounds like he's talking to a child who's refusing to eat their peas. At this point, the police don't have concrete evidence against Mark, but based solely on what was left at the scene, as well as Mark's statements, they know that he was involved. So by allowing Mark to feel in control of the interview for the first 30 minutes, then kindly but directly pointing out that his narrative doesn't make sense, and that he is the only person with the means and opportunity to have attacked Johnny, he is hoping to garner a confession. The officer had been withholding some information from Mark during the interview, that being that Johnny had informed some of his friends that when he went over to the garage earlier that day, he had met a man there who said he was making a movie. According to the SK Confessions document, when Mark initially invited Johnny over, he lost his nerve and told him that the woman was stuck in traffic and wouldn't be coming over. He then spent about 10 minutes or so showing Johnny the movie set and explaining what he was doing there. Mark also wrote that he chose Johnny because he viewed him as a lonely guy who wouldn't be missed, someone who didn't have friends, and wouldn't have told anyone where he was going. But he was wrong. Johnny was excited to meet the woman he had been talking to, and when he arrived to find a man who claimed to be shooting a movie, he immediately found the situation to be odd. He informed multiple of his friends, gave them an accurate description of the person who was present, and when he went back to the garage later that night, he gave them the directions, just in case. Mark thought that even if the police determined that the garage was used for the murder, that his story that a new padlock had been placed on it would exonerate him outright. They would simply believe he had nothing to do with it. However, he is now being confronted by the fact that his victim described him to his friends, that he accidentally placed himself at the scene of the crime when it would have taken place, and that the police know a lot more than he thought they did. By withholding this key information, the officer has allowed Mark to bury himself. If he had told Mark everything from the beginning, told him that he knew the exact date and time Johnny went missing, that they knew he met with Johnny earlier in the day, and so on, Mark would have concocted a completely different story. But now he has to try and justify lying to the police, which can be used in court to show he isn't credible. So let's see how Mark reacts, and remember, this is a man who believes he is smarter than the vast majority of people.
it explains the foreign padlock. If he switched it out or something like that, that makes sense.
Who switched it?
Whoever this guy is.
Well, he didn't switch anything. He went there and met somebody there, yeah.
Okay, but that's what I mean. Like, whoever he met there,
Yeah.
because I don't know of anybody else that has access unless they, accessed it themselves, pretty much.
Pausing once again to note that if you were ever being asked to explain a criminal's motives to the police, they are looking at you as a suspect. There is no reason why the police would ask you to try and justify someone else's actions and make them make sense to them. That is, of course, their job, and they are probably not looking to hire you. What they are trying to do is to get you to explain your motive, or to apply more pressure to you in an interrogation. If you're ever in this position, it's in your best interest to ask for a lawyer.
Your lock was totally gone off there.
Yeah.
Okay. The latch was still there, but a different padlock's there. So anybody could have come along with a set of bolt cutters, cut yours off, put their own on, right? That still doesn't give them access to the garage because there's still a deadbolt, right?
Yeah.
This guy indicates to his friends that he arrived, met a guy in there, the girl wasn't there, got a call from her later,
Okay.
was going back to the garage. And that's where the trail goes cold on us.
So, okay, let me get this straight.
Yeah.
The guy who's missing
Yeah,
shows up to my garage,
right. 5712 40th Ave, yeah.
claims to have been in it,
Yeah, and talk to a guy.
talked to another guy.
Yeah.
So now there's two of them. And then he leaves.
Because the girl's not there, that he's supposedly.
Right.
Okay.
And then he talks to her on the phone.
I don't know that he talks to her on the phone or if he gets a message from her or which way that one went.
Okay.
Okay.
He somehow ends up communicating with her and then comes
Goes back to the garage to meet her.
Okay. All right.
Now, does that sound like anything that you know
Not at all.
Mark recited the story back in order to get a firm grasp as to what's going on, what information the police have, and what he now has to reconcile with in his original statements. He claimed to have been at the garage around the same time as Johnny, but seeing as he never mentioned a strange man trying to access the garage and saying that he was there for a date, it would make very little sense if he claimed to remember that happening now. The most logical thing he can do here is leave the interview, say he's given his statement, and say that if they need anything else, they should contact his lawyer. The second most logical thing he could do is say that he didn't know anything about Johnny, has never seen or heard him before in his life, and that he would remember if someone came into the garage saying they were going to meet someone for a date. Either of those two statements would be reasonable, so let's see what he does.
Does it sound like anything that could be related in any way to any movie sort of stuff you're doing, or?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm the producer. I pretty much control all the elements.
Yeah.
So if there was anything like that, if somebody needs to borrow the place or whatever, then they would let me know.
They'd let you know.
They'd ask or something like that. So yeah, no, I don't know anything about that.
No. Does the name Jen mean anything to you?
No, Constable Maxwell asked me about that too, and
Yes,
I don't
yeah.
know Jen or anything like that.
So the name Jen doesn't mean anything to you. You don't know a Jen. You don't have an actress named Jen.
Mm-mm.
What's your wife's name?
Jess.
Jess. Not Jen.
No.
Okay. Is your wife involved in anything with the garage at all, or does she even know it exists, or?
Yeah, she knows it exists. She tries to stay out of the film stuff as much as possible. She's, from her own explanation, too close to the material, because every time I talk about these things, it's like this step, this step, this step, this step, and it's just too much, so. I try to, pretty much kind of curb that whole thing. If she asks about it, I'll gladly tell her, but generally, she's not interested. Until something comes to fruition,
Yeah.
This whole time, for the past year, I've been working on financing my other movie. She'll ask me, like, do you, is the money in the bank yet? Or something like that. Until it's in the bank, don't get excited, that sort of stuff, so.
Yeah. Okay.
But, yeah, so she's, I'm at leave and looking after the kid, and that's, pretty much the daily life. And then, when I get home, I take over.
Yeah.
We share that whole thing, so, yeah, but no.
Okay.
Unsurprisingly, Mark has once again managed to ignore the situation entirely, as well as ignore what was being asked of him, and then lied about insignificant information in order to try and protect his own ego. He doesn't want to address the situation, so he doesn't, and instead focuses on things that haven't been asked and aren't necessarily relevant.
And your parents, of course, are supportive of this.
Oh, yeah.
They live here in Edmonton?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Whereabouts do they live?
They live, like Killarney area, so it's like
Killarney.
31st Ave and 87th Street.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Know the area well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where'd you go to
Long
school?
time. I went to school in those little trio of schools that's right around their house. It was St. Matthew's
Yeah.
for elementary, and then St. C's for junior high, and then O'Leary for high school.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you're, what do you think, 29?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huh.
I'm trying to think if I've
You
seen
play any sports when you were at Larry?
Not as team sports, no. I mean, I like basketball, so I played with my buddies after school and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
didn't want it to become a job, so I didn't
Yeah.
like join the teams and stuff like that, so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So once again, John Altenur is not a name you've known. Nobody like that's tried to rent the place from you. Nobody by the name of Jen means anything to you.
No.
No relatives named Jen.
Oh, maybe, I do it in the list, but
Okay. All right.
my mom's
Fair
worth
enough.
12. So, you know, let me get back to you on that one, it's a checker for sure, but.
Yeah. Okay.
No, and I'm trying to think like if, I don't really have any like,
Yeah.
regular,
Okay, what about Mike and Jason? Now, if we were to call them up and get them to come down, I mean, what kind of guys are they? Are they decent, straight?
Oh, yeah.
The officer is now focusing his attention on the two men that Mark is trying to pawn motive onto, Mike and Jason. The only issue here is that neither Mike nor Jason are going to affirm the version of events that Mark is putting forward. The officer telling Mark that they are going to verify his story is another way of putting pressure onto him. In the past, we've seen suspects change their story or try and discredit their own witnesses, so let's see how Mark chooses to proceed.
They're good guys. They're really open dudes. I met them when I was working at Corporate Express.
Yeah.
Which is like a office supplies company.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. So Mike was the IT guy over there, and Jay did some operations and stuff like that. And
if you put money on him trying to ignore the situation by spending time talking about irrelevant information, you would have been right.
Basically, like putting out fires was his job.
Yeah.
It's complex. I wasn't quite sure, but
Yeah.
so yeah, they worked together there. Jay left a little bit shortly after I did, and then Mike hung on for a long time because it was a really easy gig with a pretty decent paycheck.
Yeah.
Until he just got bored.
Yeah.
And had to leave. The two of them still work together actually to this day at another place, and yeah. So I kind of recruited them
Yeah.
a little bit from Corporate Express to help me out on Star Wars because they were both huge fans and wanted to do it, and did the whole gambit of everything on that project, and then stuck around and said, hey, if you ever need any like set building or anything like that for day players, let us know. So they'll be the ones that I'll go to get like my apartment set and all this other stuff that I need for that film done and made. Anything that's going to be in Edmonton, they'll pretty much be supervising.
Yeah. Okay.
Because those guys are miracle workers when it comes to building things on the cheap. Like they built me an entire TIE fighter cockpit for like $130.
Really?
I couldn't believe it. I'm like, really? And like you look at this thing on a set, it looks like garbage. It's like cardboard and gels and like like caulking, and it looks like crap. But then when you look at it through a camera, because you can fool the camera pretty well, it looks really good. So we're sitting there lighting the thing and switching back and forth to get Star Wars paused at that exact moment to see what our lighting looks like, flipping back and forth, and then they come back to ours and they go, okay, now go back to ours. They think ours is the movie.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're done. It looks good. So yeah, no, they did a fantastic job. They ended up giving me like 8, 9 really good screen accurate sets for less than $3,000 in total. So, and that included like a giant friggin' Star Destroyer bridge trench and everything. And man, I don't know how they do it. The compositors are gonna have total gold to work with when they finish that off, but it's kind of already served its purpose.
Yeah.
It's already proved that I know what I'm doing and got me to the next level, but I'm just gonna finish it off anyway because I love it. And put so much work into it now anyway, this will keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of hard to go back to that though when you've got like so much other stuff going on. I'm working on developing paying projects. I've got this incredibly beautiful daughter that I just love to death, and I want to get home to. And
Oh,
so she's 8 months.
oh yeah.
I've been sleeping straight through the night since the second week.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
we got completely lucky with that. Great disposition and
Yeah.
everything. She's just amazing.
Oh, lucky.
I want her to join the family visit.
Really?
Break it down. She's like, Dad, I got a script for you. It'd be awesome.
Good.
But
That would be great. Yeah. Okay, Mark. Let me step out because I've got some other people. I just want to go over what we've talked about with them and see if there's anything else I'm missing.
Okay.
I think I've got to talk to Mike and to Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only other two people that might have had any access to that garage at all.
So after nearly 5 minutes of allowing Mark to circumvent his question, the officer carefully brings the conversation back to what he asked the first time. Because he has an active goal in this conversation, he isn't sidetracked the way most of us can be in regular conversation. How many times have you asked someone a simple question only to walk away 30 minutes later, having talked about something entirely different, with no idea how you got on that subject? Mark has likely used his niche interest in film as a smokescreen in the past, and could probably distract most people by talking about how he made a $130 replica of a Star Wars set. But because the officer has a direct goal and refuses to be swayed by Mark, he is repeatedly being brought back to the subject that he is desperate to avoid. So let's see how he responds.
Yeah. They're the only guys that have the key to the deadbolt. The big reason why I got the padlock is because I just didn't trust the deadbolt. Because, okay, when I first got the place, I knew that Kirkside was looking at replacing it, so they actually had like a lock guy come in and put a new deadbolt on, which is fine, but I don't know what to compare it to. It's only half the equation. You have this deadbolt, and then the hole that it's in, I don't know if you've seen this thing, but it's like all carved out. There's a bunch of space in there. It's like, I don't know, it didn't look that reliable to me in terms of holding. So, I mean, I didn't put much stock in it. I thought honestly that the latch with the padlock would be A, more of a visual deterrent if anybody wanted to get in there, and B, just kind of be a little stronger in general because of the way that it was actually like fastened on there. So, I mean, I feel like an idiot now, but half the time I wouldn't even bother with the deadbolt because it's like, I didn't really believe in it, quite frankly, from looking at it and loosening it and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was off and on. Sometimes I lock it just for the hell of it, but I mean, generally if I'm coming in and out, I just leave it.
Okay.
So.
Now you say generally if I'm coming in and out. And we talked about how many times you've been there.
Yeah.
And there was one weekend where you were there shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've been back about a week ago. And then this last week to drop off cleaning supplies.
Right.
Yeah. And we know that was probably the 15th. Did you drop them off the same day you bought them?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what did you use to pay for those?
I think it was my MasterCard. It's either MasterCard or cash, something like that. I had it all floating around, so.
Okay. MasterCard. What kind of MasterCard do you have?
Mark is now shifting the story ever so slightly. He claimed he used the master lock and the door lock together, meaning that it would be impossible for someone without a key to both locks to get in without there being signs of forced entry. But now he is claiming that because, quote, didn't believe in the door lock, unquote, he only really used the padlock that he placed on the door, the one he claims was changed by some other person, on some random occasion. It's a small change, but unlike everything else he has said thus far, serves a purpose. He wants to prompt the police to look at other people, not just him and his production assistants. I'm going to skip past this portion, as Mark just begins talking about his money issues, which is irrelevant.
Secure that up and get it done, and worked out great.
Now, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the business. Now, you told me about some projects you're shooting on, and I want to ask you, if you're doing any other kind of shooting there, like is there any, and I mean, I'm just wondering because it brings into play different sort of characters. Are you shooting any porn there or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
I've actually been teased about that a lot.
Yeah.
And I tease back by saying that, oh, I should have gotten into porn because it's guaranteed money in the bank.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's really not the environment for that. For one thing, it's not even heated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, no. It's
Yeah,
just,
it would be a little cool.
And then, again, if a filmmaker gets into that side of the industry, the other side will never take you seriously.
Okay.
So, unless I want to go making like 100 aliases, call myself Dick Hard or some stupid porn name or whatever, you know, like that just wouldn't make any sense. And I've never been really anywhere near interested in that kind of material. I want to be taken seriously. I don't necessarily have to go after Academy Awards or anything like that. I just want to make movies that'll entertain people and get out there into actual movie theaters and have tickets and stuff like that. So that's always been the ultimate goal for me. But yeah, no porn or anything like that.
Pausing to note that Dick Hard is maybe the dumbest name for a porn actor or director. I think it's funny. Dick Hard is probably the second cousin 3 times removed from Seymour Asses. I think they're probably related. It should also be noted that Mark had never and would never make any movie. For as much as he talks about wanting to be a real respected director and producer, everything he made was entirely theoretical.
Okay. So, have you ever heard of these online dating site kind of things? What are some of the ones you've heard of?
Oh man, I don't know. Match.com. I've heard of the Plenty of Fish one.
Okay, Plenty of Fish.
Yeah, there's what else is there? I don't know. There's a bunch of them. There's like hundreds of them.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. You don't frequent them?
No.
Okay.
I did some research on them for a freelance article that I wrote. That was like about a month ago.
About a month ago?
Maybe more. A little over a month ago. This is a freelance project that I got. I'm on this website called ifreelance.com to get like, you know, basically writing gigs and stuff like that. And this guy said, you know what, we needed an article for online dating and stuff like that, and the rules and the etiquette and whatnot. I said, oh, okay, I'll jump on that. So checked out some of that stuff in order to write the article and put it together and did it and got paid for it and everything like that. So yeah, but
so what did you end up doing with that? So you pretend you're somebody and do the online dating sort of thing and land it all up?
Go in there, but you tell everybody what's going on, right? Like you know, it's a social experiment for the purpose of figuring out what your guys' view and opinion of it is and that kind of thing. And it's a lot easier just to touch base with the people who use the site and get their overall opinion from it.
Yeah.
So they would say, well, you know, I get different opinions too. Like the guys say things like, well, you know, it's really tough because there's lots of competition. The girls come back with the feedback of, well, everybody on here is a pig, you know, and that kind of thing. And so I kind of, you know, break that down, try to get a little more creative with it and make it something that someone would actually feel like reading. And the way I understood it was that they were trying to get something that they could have published in like Maxim Online or something like that and post it. For me, I wasn't worried about the publishing part because they can do whatever they want.
So Mark, without realizing it, is burying himself once again. He just admitted to using the dating site that was used to lure John Attlinger to the garage, as recently as a month ago, but is claiming that when he used it, it was for a social experiment. He was just collecting data for an article that someone was writing that might have been for Maxim, which makes sense. All prestigious up-and-coming actors, producers, directors, also freelance as social experimenting Maxim writers. Sure.
Want with it?
Yeah.
It's just like, you know what, if I'm going to write this for you, give me a paycheck and we're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Here, done, gone.
yeah.
So in that, you weren't really posing as a person that was trying to date people. What you were
No.
doing is just contacting them saying, hey, looking for views on.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why you know what some of those sites are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Now, like I said, I'm going to talk to my people and see if I'm missing anything and run over stuff. Bear with us a few minutes and thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay.
If you come back and I'm sleeping, just nudge me up.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
You
don't start swinging with it. Okay. I was wondering, did I? Oh, big leg.
So that's where the first interview ends. Mark might have thought he bested the police officers, especially since he deleted the SK confessions file and swore that he had nothing to do with Johnny's disappearance. So, all things considered, the police should probably take his word for it, but that isn't what happened. The following day, Mark would be brought back into the interrogation room. There's a first part of this interview that is referenced, but I wasn't able to find it anywhere. It's likely being withheld from the viewing public for some reason, but we were not able to source it. Side note, I have no idea why the footage is black and white. We downloaded the video from the Edmonton Sun YouTube channel as linked below, and this is the format in which it is publicized.
About contacting a lawyer, that still holds true, okay, just so you're aware.
Okay.
If at any time we're talking, you want to contact a lawyer, you can do so at any time. I'll take you to a phone. There's something else I want to tell you, Mark, and that's that there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that you're involved in the disappearance of John Altinger. No doubt in my mind at all, Mark.
Why?
So, that's a fairly stupid reaction. If an officer of the law is telling you that they believe that you participated in a crime, you should immediately ask to speak to an attorney. No amount of trying to convince them that you're innocent will actually change their minds, because you were not engaging in a normal conversation at that point. They are not your friend, you don't have a personal relationship, and it doesn't matter whether or not you can get them to be on your side. Their job is to uphold the law, and if they believe you've broken it, so much so that they say it to your face, the discussion should end there. But here's why it doesn't in this case. Mark fancied himself a sociopath. He viewed himself as a master manipulator who could get anyone and everyone on his side. He wrote about wooing past girlfriends the way you catch exotic animals, and would say that he turned himself into whoever they wanted him to be. The only issue is that he's not the manipulative mastermind that he thinks he is. He's an idiot, whose lies can and were easily fact-checked by the police. However, because he believes he's the master manipulator who can outsmart anyone, he truly believes that he can worm his way out of the situation. He's asking why, because he thinks he can manipulate the facts of the situation so he can look innocent, and convince the police not to believe the direct evidence. But we've already spent over an hour watching this doofus lie about everything in his life. He isn't convincing in the slightest, so his delusional belief in himself is ridiculous.
As I said, Mark, there's no doubt in my mind that you're involved in this disappearance. I just want to get to the bottom of this, because this is not going to go away. It's not going to leave you, Mark.
I don't understand.
I'm going to explain some of the reasons to you. But you do understand, because you know what I'm talking about. You're involved in this, and unfortunately, something got carried away. Something got carried away with this guy. I mean, talking to you here tonight, you seem like a decent guy. And I think that something happened that night that maybe you just didn't have total control of. And I'm here to get to the bottom of it. Because it's not going to go away. This is going to stay with you. And we need to clear this up here and now. We need to clear this up tonight. You need to tell me the truth about what's going on. What happened with this fella. I mean, this happened because of the movie thing? Something that went too far?
The officer isn't giving Mark anything to go off of, which is why he isn't denying anything outright. Mark asked him why he thought he was guilty, in the hopes that the officer would list some piece of evidence that he could explain away or discredit, but the officer didn't do that. Instead, he repeats that there is no doubt that he is involved in Johnny's disappearance, which Mark cannot effectively deny. It's also notable that his reaction of being accused of one of the most heinous crimes a person can commit is passivity. Most innocent people respond negatively when they are accused of crimes, because that's the worst thing someone can say to you. Think back to the last time a friend or family member accused you of something you didn't do, and how angry you got in response. Sure, they were just saying you broke a toy or stole a shirt, but you were upset because you knew you were innocent. Meanwhile, Mark doesn't care that he's being accused of kidnapping and murder.
I have no idea what the hell is going on.
You do have an idea. You have a very good idea, Mark, about what's going on. You know exactly what happened there that night. I mean, you haven't told us the truth. You haven't told us anything close to the truth. You do understand we've talked to Joss? We've got his side of the story. All I'm looking for is your side of the story. But the truth. Not what you've been telling me. Because what you've been telling me hasn't been the truth. Has it, Mark?
This can't be. I don't.
What do you mean it can't be?
Again, because the interviewer has given Mark no singular piece of evidence as being the reason why he knows he's guilty, he has no way to argue against the statement. If he had brought up the SK Confessions document, Mark would excuse it away by claiming it was a screenplay or a creative writing exercise. If he said that Mark was the only person in the area at the time of the murder, he could say he got the dates wrong and actually went back the day prior, and so on. Because the officer isn't being specific, Mark can't think of an argument as to why he's innocent.
I just don't understand.
Well, what don't you understand? We have a fellow who's missing. We know he's been to your garage. We've talked to all the neighbors now. You know, the neighbors saw you changing the lock about a week and a half ago. Neighbors watch. They see all these things. Little things that you don't realize. Okay? We know the lock was changed long before the 15th. Yet when you get there on the 15th, you tell me, oh, that's your lock on there on the 15th. It's not till you go back with the policeman last night that you notice, or you say. So that's a lie. That's a lie you told me. When you gave your version of events to Detective Tabler last night, your version of events was different than what you told me today. What you wrote down was different than what you told me in this room. What you told me in this room when I first came in was different from your final version of events. You've changed your whole story. All kinds of different lies.
This interviewer is a genius, because instead of giving pieces of physical evidence against Mark, or simply saying that parts of his story don't add up, he's discrediting him entirely. He brings up that it was Mark that bought the new lock, that multiple people independently witnessed him changing the lock, and that he lied to the officer about that. He goes over how Mark's story has changed in every telling, and doesn't tell him how it's changed every time, meaning that Mark can't excuse himself. He's showing Mark that he is unreliable, and why he is right to not believe him. It's truly something to behold.
Now, I know this isn't an easy thing to live with. Something went wrong there. Like I said, I don't think you're a bad guy. You seem like a decent guy. You got a wife, you got a small child, you're trying to do the best. I don't think, I don't know, but I don't think you're doing that well financially. I think it's a tough life what you're in. You're trying to do your best, but something went wrong. Maybe you were just trying to make a better movie. I don't know. But something went wrong and you're involved. And this is not going to go away, Mark. And you know that. You're not a dumb guy. You know it's not going to go away. This is going to keep on eating at you and eat
I
and
just
eat.
feel like I'm in the fucking Twilight Zone right now.
And why do you feel you're in the Twilight Zone? We need to get to the truth about what happened with John Altinger. And I know you know that truth. You are definitely not a dumb man. You know very well that you don't buy a car that's worth over $10,000 from someone for $40. You know that.
So after the first interview, but before this one, Mark suddenly remembered that he did meet John Attlinger. He told detectives that while at the garage, he had been approached on the street by a man matching Johnny's description, who asked if he wanted to buy his car. Mark claimed that Johnny seemed in a hurry, and told him that, quote, a sugar mama, unquote, was taking him on a long vacation, and that he wouldn't need the vehicle. So he of course bought the car for $40. Which is such an unbelievable story that it immediately begs the question, how in the hell did Mark forget about that interaction? Put yourself in his position. He's going to his film studio one day, and a man basically gives him a vehicle in perfect working condition for less than a pair of shoes. That same week, that man goes missing. Why wouldn't you immediately contact the police and tell them that he sold you his car? Why wouldn't you remember that detail until you're already being accused of a crime? That doesn't make any sense. But again, Mark is smarter than us, so it probably is just going over our heads.
You know that you get a bill of sale. You deal with items on eBay. You sell items all the time. Just like going to a store and buying anything. That part of your story is just lie after lie after lie. And it's time to end those lies, Mark. I mean, your version about the gas, your first version to Mike Tabler, you're leaving. You're leaving the garage, going to get gas. Then he approaches you. Now in your version today, no, you got gas before. Your reason for having gas doesn't even make sense. You're buying gas for a lawnmower you don't own? You're buying gas just to keep in your car? No, you're buying gas to get rid of things. You shake your head, but you know what I'm saying is true. Specifically, do you remember talking to the constable last night? Specifically, you talked to the constable last night. He specifically asked you 3 or 4 times, do you remember seeing a red car any time around your garage, anything? No, officer, I don't remember anything about a red car. Yet now, and you never mention that to Detective Tabler. Not once do you mention a red car or buying a car off an individual you didn't know for $40 while he's asking about the disappearance of a guy who's seen it at your garage. And it's obvious why you didn't mention it, because you had something to do with his disappearance. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, you have a barrel in your garage. A barrel you say you buy for garbage. Everyone knows in the movie industry those are known as burn barrels. We got that off your own friends. They're the ones telling us this. Your co-workers. What happened to John, Mark? What'd you do with him?
Wrong tree.
Wrong dream?
No, tree.
Wrong tree. And what do you mean by that? do you mean by that, Mark?
I'm done.
What do you mean you're done?
I mean, I'm not talking anymore. This is ridiculous.
Mark has some of the strangest reactions that we've ever seen, which only becomes stranger when you remember that he thinks that he's a master manipulator who has the ability to think through every possible reaction. But when confronted by his own actions and how massive and obvious his lies are, he just recedes into himself. He's pouting like a child and barely putting up any sort of fight. Again, let's say he's innocent and everything he has said thus far is true, and he just accepts it and pouts about it. He doesn't deny it, say that man is crazy, say that he didn't do it, or provide more supporting evidence. He just says, "Oh, I'm done," passively. He had more conviction when talking about the movies that he didn't make.
Well, what is your explanation? You haven't answered any of the questions. If you didn't do anything wrong, why wouldn't you answer those questions? Do you know why, Mark? Both of you and I know the answer. Because you're involved. You have the license plates to his vehicle in your car. You have the keys to his vehicle in your car. And this guy's missing and you have his car. Like, you need to accept the fact here, Mark, that your life has now changed. Because like I said before, this is never ever going to go away. I mean, I have to wonder what's going on in your life that gets you involved in something like this. You must either be having tough times at home or tough times financially or something. So what's going to happen when these neighbors pick your picture out as the guy changing the locks in that garage? After you told me you didn't know anything about those locks. What's going to happen then, Mark? What's going to happen with your wife and child now? What are they going to do? What happened to John, Mark? Was this your plan or was this somebody else's? Somebody else put you up to this? Do you not have any answers, Mark? Why not? I'm telling you that you're involved in this disappearance and you sit there and say nothing. Shocks me. You do understand these things don't go away. Like, this is going to stay with you the rest of your life. Do you understand that? Like, I look at you, I see you sitting here, I've talked to you for several hours now, and I just can't figure out the why. What drove you to this? Is there something going on? Obviously there's something going on behind the scenes that I don't know about. because you seem like a decent guy that I'd go have a beer with. That's the type of guy you come across as. Yeah, you're involved over your head in this.
Is anything that you're saying genuine, or is this some sort of tactic?
Obviously, it's a tactic. If you are ever brought into an interrogation room, you should never feel as if the police across from you are your friend or your buddy, especially if they say things like, "I think you're a good guy," or "You're someone I'd like to get a beer with." They're trying to feign closeness to you so you feel like you can open up to them. But it's notable that when the investigator talks about how likable and normal Mark is, that he responds. For nearly 5 minutes, Mark has listened to the detective ask him open-ended questions about why he took part in Johnny's disappearance, and imply that things were going on in his personal life that caused him to hurt someone else, and so on. But it's only when the investigator implies that Mark isn't as good-natured as he assumed that he steps in, asking if he's being genuine, because that is one thing that Mark prided himself on.
You got to get away from the acting part, Mark, and listen to what I'm saying. You have told me nothing but lies. An innocent man does not come in here and tell lies. That's genuine, Mark. Everything I'm telling you in here is genuine. So get out of your film producer mode and the facade of thinking that everyone's an actor. Because this is real life. All right? Real life. If you were telling me the truth, you would have one story. One story that would flow from beginning to end. And you could repeat that 100 times with no changes in the story. Yours is so bad. How do you explain the neighbors? The neighbors see that car there before the 15th of October. Why would that car be at your garage before the 15th of October? You conveniently can't remember where you were on the 14th of October.
Nothing convenient about it. It's just actual fact. Despite anything that's been going on, I really cannot.
You cannot what?
Remember.
Remember what?
About the 14th.
So you can't remember about the 14th. Why did you lie about the 15th? What is your explanation for providing me basically different versions of what happened on the 15th?
Am I being charged?
Not yet.
Am I free to go?
Yep.
Then I will.
Okay. We're seizing your car, so you won't be getting it back. We'll be getting a search warrant to go through the car, forensic examination. Okay? As soon as we're done interviewing everybody else, we'll be coming back to charge you. It's just a matter of time. All right? Do you have any questions about any of that? Do you want to clear anything up now so I don't have to keep coming after you?
Mark tries to assert dominance by leaving, only to not leave, which is very funny, but also telling. Mark still believed that he could get out of this interview and find a way to excuse his behavior. He thought that if he just had some time to himself, he could think of an excuse as to why he made himself look so guilty. He fully intended to leave when he said he would. However, When the officer responds that they would be taking his car and charging him in a few hours, he stays planted on the couch. The illusion of power that he had slipped through his fingers, and he knows now, no matter what happens, that he's going to jail.
Any questions about anything, Mark? You know pretty well everything's over for you now. You can't worry about what your wife and your family's going to think, because this isn't going away. You have to get past that. Are you that cold a person, Mark, that you can live with this the rest of your life? Doesn't bother you at all?
What does that mean?
Well, you're involved in this disappearance of this guy.
But we'll live with it. What do you mean?
Well, what you did to him. You can live with that? That's what I mean. You can live with that, what's happened to him? I mean, only you know what's happened to him. I'll find that out eventually. It's going to take me a little time. I just got involved in this case today. But it's so obvious you're involved, Mark. It's like you're not a very good actor. And you're in the business.
Never said I was an actor.
Producer. You've seen actors.
Pausing again, but Mark did say that he was an actor, and he wrote multiple parts into his scripts for himself because he thought he was a better actor than the people he hired. He was more attracted to producing and directing, though, because he liked the control and power it gave him. Actors don't get to make choices for their characters and have to follow direction, which makes them submissive to the will of others, which was unattractive to Mark. But this is a cutting remark for the officer to say. He's already determined that Mark is likely not going to confess, and that trying to gain his trust is no longer beneficial, so he is essentially negging him, going over how his lies and manipulations were stupid, and how he isn't nearly as brilliant as he thought he was, but continuing on.
You're not good at it at all. You're a very, very poor liar. But I mean, how do you go home at night? Living with yourself over what you've done to this guy. How do you explain that to your wife? Your child's only 8 months, so you don't have to explain it to her. She won't even know what's going on. Like, it's going to eat at you. If you're a normal person, it's going to eat at you. If you're that cold and callous, which I don't think you are. You don't strike me as that type of person. If something went wrong in that garage that day, then you need to tell me that. If something went wrong that was out of your control, this is your chance to tell it. You know, this is your chance to say, hey, detective, yeah, something went wrong. Things got out of control. Something happened there that I didn't want to happen. This is your chance. You know, I don't know much about this John guy. I'm slowly finding out things. If something went wrong and he came over that garage when you were there, this is your chance to tell me. I mean, if you guys got into an argument over something, I don't know what, things got carried away, so be it. We can deal with that. But you have to let me know that. You know, I don't know if he came over there with somebody else, or was getting stupid, or was trying to pull stuff on you. I don't know. I know this guy's a bit of a weirdo. I know he's into different things that the average person isn't into. You know, and maybe he tried something. I don't know. I don't know exactly what happened. What I do know is that you're involved. And you know that. It's obvious. It's obvious by your whole demeanor. And like I said, it's not going away. It's just starting to build.
I understand what you're saying.
Well, you understand it, but you don't have an explanation for it. Why is it, Mark, you don't have an explanation?
Fear.
Pardon me? I didn't hear you. I mean, I know it's tough. You know, I don't know much about your life, but you know, was this something that you tried to avoid and you just couldn't?
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know. Did he try something in there? Did he try something you're just defending yourself? I don't know. You were the one that was there.
It's a really weird comment that you made.
Pardon me?
It's a very weird comment you made.
Which comment is that?
About what?
So the interrogator is trying to use the read technique at this point, where he asks a series of questions about the crime in a generally understanding tone, without any sort of judgment, and even goes so far as to offer an alternative, almost justified version of events. Here, he is asking if Johnny may have come on to him or attacked him, making the murder an act of self-defense. That is obviously not the case, and there is no evidence of that, but he's trying to offer Mark a way out, and give him a chance to change his story, because if he were to outright admit that he had been lying before, it would discredit his original version of events entirely. Mark has gone mostly mute, as his mind is likely racing, realizing the situation that he's found himself in.
Which comment was that, Mark? I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, Mark.
Can't help but feel like that's a tactic. I just feel like everything is a tactic right now.
Why do you think that? When you know what I've told you in this room is the truth, so how do you say that the tactic?
It's just, I know we're not seeing a movie, but it's a cop thing.
Mark is mumbling, but he said that he doesn't know if he can believe the interviewer or not, because he has seen police interviews in movies, and he knows that they do this kind of thing often. So he believes he is an expert, or at least somewhat knowledgeable about police interrogations, because he's watched Law and Order and CSI, which tracks, since he thought he could be an uncatchable serial killer after watching Dexter.
This is real life stuff. You gotta get away from the movies.
Yeah, I know.
That's the problem here. All I'm here for is get the truth. That's my job. There's two sides to every story. I know why John went to the garage. I know a little bit about his background and what he's into. Not very pretty.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm not going to go into all that, because that's not the stuff that you need to know. But let's just say he's got some skeletons in his closet. And I know that he could have done something there to provoke things, to cause trouble. And if he did, and something happened because of his provoking or provocation there, then what I'm telling you is this is your chance to get it out. Something happened there between the two of you. Then you need to let me know now. Was it just the two of you in the garage, or did he come with someone else? Mark?
I think I need some time. I need to be able to sleep.
This isn't going to go away while you sleep, Mark.
I know.
That's the problem. Something happened there. Both you and I know it. And time isn't going to make it go away. It's time for you to step up to the plate. Tell me what happened to John. Tell me where he is. So we can do the decent thing and not only for him but for his family. And for your own well-being. You're not going to be able to live with yourself with this for the rest of your life.
You'd be surprised what I could live with.
It's going to eat at you and eat at you. It's going to affect your family because it's affecting you. What's going to happen with your daughter? I know that's weighing on your mind. I know what's weighing on your mind about your wife. How would you describe your marriage? Is it good?
Everything was going fantastic.
Everything was
She
until
checked to
what?
see if she left me with a message. She was worried yesterday and couldn't sleep at all. And even tonight, she had to take a Unison to try to get to sleep. And then when I didn't come home, she started calling again.
Well, she's worried about you. But this isn't going to end. You know, I had a family, a relative of mine was murdered back in 1997. Whitehorse, Yukon. My wife's sister was murdered by her husband. Family thing. Not like this.
Are you serious?
Serious. It was actually made national news. It was a big thing about the defense of provocation. The guy's name is Ralph Klassen. That was my brother-in-law at the time. And he strangled her. He strangled his wife, which is my wife's sister, in bed. They were separated. Come home and thought she was fooling around, and he was out to lunch. There was no fooling around going on. None at all. And he strangled her with his hands. So hard that he actually sprained his 2 thumbs. And what happened was he leaves a note in the house saying that he couldn't live with himself and he was going to end his own life. So I don't know if you've ever been to Whitehorse, but he drove up. I wasn't up there myself. My wife went up for the trial with her sisters, but he drives up on a hill in his little Datsun B210 truck. And his plan was, they found out this later from talking to him, that's how we know, but his plan was to drive head on into one of the iron ore trucks that work at the mines up there. So he waited and waited, he said. This is what he's telling the Mounties later. And no iron ore truck came along, so a propane tanker was coming down the highway. So he drives down the hill, he smashes head on a propane tanker, and just before he hits it, he ducks. And if you can believe it, he ends up with a broken toe. That was his whole injuries from this accident. The truck driver ends up breaking its back so bad that he can't work anymore. He's not crippled, but he can't work anymore. Never ends up working again, I guess. And they take my brother-in-law to hospital. And at the hospital, he tells the nurse that he did something to his wife. So they send the Mounties over there, and they find her in bed. And then they come back, and they end up, of course, charged him with second-degree murder. He got convicted of manslaughter, and his defense was provocation, that he was provoked into it. That's kind of my point here, is that he's saying he's provoked. That's his wife. And there was no provocation at all. It was a joke defense in my mind. My wife sat through 2 weeks of the trial with her sisters up there and couldn't believe it. Absolutely devastated the family. And he got a whole 5 years in jail. That's what he got. He served, I think, 2.5 total. I never did find out what happened to him. Out at Williams Head Penitentiary in BC, which is on Vancouver Island. Frickin' golf course on there. They've got a par 3 golf course, and they live in like condos. System's a joke.
Wait, who lives in condos?
The prisoners at Williams Head Penitentiary, they live in like condo complexes, not even cells.
So,
but the point is that he raised the defense of provocation. And if that's what's happened in this case, and that's what I'm telling you, you need to tell me. If you were provoked some way, whether it was some sort of incident that arose, then now's the time. The only thing I give my brother-in-law credit for was he did step up to the plate. And he did tell him what happened. Something obviously went on between the two of you, Mark. Something went on between you and John. And I don't think it happened on the 15th. It happened before that.
So Mark is still unaware of how much evidence there is against him. All he knows is that the interviewer is aware that he's been lying since he was brought in, and that they aren't buying his story about Johnny selling him his car for $40. He doesn't know that they have the murder weapon, or his written confession from his computer. In his mind, he is still mostly in the clear with this. There's still a chance that if he keeps to his original stories, and keeps denying that he had any part in the crime, that he'll be able to walk away with no issue. So the officer tries to make confessing to murder appealing. He tells him a story about a man who killed his wife, but he's in such a luxurious prison facility that he isn't confined to a cell, and gets to play golf whenever he wants to. He tries to make the idea of going to prison sound like a vacation, and goes further to say that he respects Mark less than the man who killed his relative, because he at least had the balls to confess. So let's see how Mark responds. The next clips will be longer, as Mark becomes less and less responsive over time.
It's not going to be easy living with this, Mark. Not going to be easy for anybody. It wasn't easy for us. Family was devastated. It's going to happen. Those are the facts. Those are the things you can't change. You can't change now that this has happened, but we also can't go back. We can't go back and take that day back that all this happened. But we can do the right thing. And the right thing is telling me the truth about what happened that night. What happened between the two of you. Something went wrong. What went wrong that day, Mark? This guy come over there uninvited? What happened? Tell me something, Mark. Do you really think this is going to go away? You don't, and you don't think that because you're not a stupid guy. So what can we do to get to the bottom of this, Mark? Was this an accident? How did it happen, Mark? happened spur of the moment. Because you didn't really do a lot of thinking about afterwards. Which tells me it happened by spur of the moment or by accident. Something like that. Tells me you didn't want to do it on purpose. If that's the case, Mark, this is the time to tell me.
As opposed to what other time?
Well, there's not going to be another time. I'm just telling you, and I keep telling you, and you know it, you've agreed with me that it's not going to go away.
Oh.
And you know it's not going to go away, Mark.
What time did you wake up today?
Early.
Well, I mean, not today, I guess yesterday.
Early.
Is the adrenaline keeping you going?
No. I'm tired too.
I feel like that's all that I'm on right now.
So let's get to the truth. And then we can end this. The problem is you don't want to tell me the truth. Why don't you want to tell me the truth?
Mark is incredibly unresponsive. When he was first brought in, he believed that there was no issue that he couldn't find his way out of. All he had to do was talk in circles around the idiot cop, then go home and pretend the whole thing was a giant mix-up. But at this point, he knows that they know that he did this. He knows everything he has said has only buried him deeper and deeper, and that he is probably going to prison for the rest of his life. But the interviewer doesn't let up. Mark's mind is racing, trying to think of how to get out of this situation, and he almost was able to walk out of the door. If the interviewer stops talking and allows Mark even a moment to let his mind recover, this interview could be over. So he keeps applying pressure. He keeps giving Mark a way out, keeps making him feel like the only way he's going to see the light of day is by confessing to the murder.
Can you answer that question, Mark? Why can't you give me your version of events that night?
I'm scared. And I always have this instinct to want to be able to try to hold on to I don't even know.
After hours of interviewing, Mark officially begins to break down. He is admitting to lying, admitting to giving the police false information, and admitting, at least in part, to causing Johnny to disappear. So let's see where this goes.
I can imagine you're scared. That's a perfectly natural feeling at this time. But things happen there, Mark, between you and John. And I don't think he can speak for himself anymore. You're the only one that can tell us what happened that night. What's going through your mind right now, Mark?
Almost nothing. Anything I try to push out is like what's it like? It's like skating uphill. This tired trying to formulate thought anymore.
I don't think you need to formulate thought. What I think you need to formulate is the truth. There's two sides to every story.
Yeah, but stories come with questions and more answers and more stories.
Those stories come with facts and truth, there won't be many questions. People make mistakes. It happens every day. Some mistakes are bigger than others, but life goes on, and we deal with those mistakes.
Well, I guess my marriage is over, so I don't really have to worry about protecting her anymore.
His marriage was not over at this point, but Mark knows there is no way she would stay with him if she found out he killed someone. Add to the fact that he had been cheating on her throughout their relationship, and wrote about how much he enjoyed cheating on his wife in his manifesto. So he knows that their relationship is likely ending. But it's notable how quick he is to discard her because she is no longer of use to him. He would only try to, quote, protect her, unquote, if they were actively together. It doesn't matter that protecting her also means protecting their child, and making sure that she can raise them safely and comfortably. Because he doesn't directly receive any benefits from being with her, he thinks she's useless, and she should be thrown to the wolves, so to speak. To be clear, he wronged her, repeatedly and with malice, but her leaving him after he murdered a man in cold blood is unjustified in his mind. She, of course, is being selfish and cruel, even though that's far from the case.
Your daughter will be taken care of.
Yeah.
Your wife's here, your mother, father. Parents in Edmonton, are they not?
Mm-hmm.
She'll be looked after. I can see this is eating you up. Something went wrong there, Mark. Tell me what went wrong. You know deep down, Mark, that everything I've told you in this room has been a fact, has been the truth. I haven't tried to baffle you with bullshit on anything.
Again, you know what? I mean, you say that, but part of me is always going to wonder.
That's because you watch too much TV. We all do, I guess.
No, I think I understand the difference.
Bottom line, though, is I'm just here to get the truth. And the truth isn't always pleasant. I know that. I mean, this wasn't somebody you knew. You weren't close to this fella. You what he was like. Not a family member. I just don't know what set it off. Because your demeanor appears to be so calm. So rational. Like what set it off that night to set these things in motion? What happened between you and John, Mark?
I can't even get there right now. Right now I'm thinking about immediate needs, like
What are those immediate needs?
contact lenses are going to burn a hole in my head in a couple of hours. I mean, I want to get to the finish line, but at the same time, I think
Well, I think we should get to the finish line.
consulting with a lawyer is going to be really important.
You can do that at any time you want. Told you that right from the start. You know exactly why you're here. Because John's gone missing. The reason you're sitting there is you're the guy that made him go missing. I'm just trying to find out the why behind it. Why this happened. What turned it to make you do something like this? There's obviously got to be other factors involved. How long have you been married, Mark?
Almost 2 years. This time.
How long were you married the first time?
4. Looks like I'll become the statistic. Didn't expect that.
Well, I think you already were a statistic when you were divorced the first time. Right?
Well, some things you just gotta do because you realize that your ultimate decision leads to what's gonna end up in your long-term happiness, and you can't just feel obligated to how other people are going to think about it.
Don't you think that applies here too? Long-term happiness? I think it applies. Yeah, it seems like the end of the world now.
We're not that important.
I think we are.
That's going to get really deep and philosophical, so I won't even go there.
Yeah, I'm not a big philosophical guy either. I work more on facts and truth. And I know I'm not dealing with a dumb individual here. But something went wrong there. And you can fill that in. It's not easy, Mark, I know. But how does your life go on if we don't clear this up? How do you ever begin to rebuild it again?
I think something like that's even possible.
Oh, of course I do. Happens all the time. I see it all the time. I used to work at Edmonton Max. I was the liaison guy out there. So I do all the investigations out at Edmonton Institution. Dealt with all the hardcore convicts, guys that were in there for way worse than this. Like, I'm talking guys that have done mass murders, multiple killings, killing family members, planned executions. They accepted their punishment. They're doing their time. But those guys, they're a different breed. They're not you. Those guys, very, very few. I can't even think of one at the Max, maybe at other institutions. They're the hardcore of the hardcore. They're the ones that have no remorse. They don't care. It's like they're missing something. I don't know if they were born with something missing or what, but they don't have that remorse. I call it like a remorse syndrome. They don't have it. They don't have a conscience. They don't care about anybody. To them, killing somebody means nothing. I mean, those are the worst of the worst. Those are the ones you deal with out there all the time. That's not you. You're not that type of person.
This is unintentionally hilarious, because that's the exact kind of person Mark wanted to be. In his ultimate fantasy, the one that he dedicated himself to living out, he wanted to be the unfeeling killer who used and abused people wherever he went. The type of person who saw others as objects, destroyed lives, and walked away knowing that no one would ever know how evil he really was, as he twiddled his mustache, and he failed at the first, second, and third hurdle. The interviewer is insulting him in the harshest way possible, because he is telling Mark that he isn't an unfeeling sociopath like Dexter. He isn't like most hardened criminals, and that he failed so spectacularly that he looks like an idiot. A link will be left in the description box down below to the rest of the interview, but the remaining 15 minutes are uneventful. Mark would be arrested and charged with first-degree murder 11 days after this interview, and would admit to killing Attlinger, but claimed that he did so in self-defense. He claimed that his ultimate goal was to, quote, make a multiple-format psychosis-layering entertainment, and that was his intention apparently when he contacted Attlinger via Plenty of Fish. He stated that he wanted to expand on the psychological thriller he was making by turning it into a novel and creating an ARG around it. He wanted parts of the story to be true, so that all of it would be believed, and he could be the orchestrator of a modern-day urban legend. He could be like Slender Mark, just standing out in the woods in his Wolverine cosplay. The St. Albert Gazette would publish an article going over his testimony, writing, quote, in describing the attack on Attlinger, Twitchell said that he told Attlinger, after he'd come back to the garage for the third time, that it was all a ruse, and he explained his entertainment concept. He said Attlinger became angry and defensive, and called Twitchell pathetic. He told the jury the two men struggled after Attlinger kicked him in the back. He said at one point he believed Attlinger was going to smash his laptop, and he moved towards it, but Attlinger thought he was going for one of the metal pipes that were also laying on the table. He said he pulled it out of Attlinger's hand, and in the ensuing struggle, hit him several times with it, including once on the head. He said Attlinger then took the pipe back, and Twitchell tried to stand back from him. Twitchell said at that point, he unhooked the clasp of the military knife he had on his belt, simply to show Attlinger they were on equal footing. I thought that would send a clear enough message, he said on the stand. Attlinger rushed forward, according to Twitchell, and he instinctively pulled the knife out and stabbed the man. Twitchell said he panicked and froze for minutes after Attlinger was stabbed, and described a war inside of his head, between calling 911 to aid Attlinger, while at the same time realizing how bad the situation would look if anyone were to see it. Unsurprisingly, no one believed that story because it's stupid. Twitchell was eventually convicted of first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, which is what he deserves. So, if you made it to this portion of the video, thank you for watching. Your continued support means the world to me, and I hope to repay that kindness with more quality content. With that in mind, if there's a video you would like to see made, or a story you want more attention brought to, you can email me at dreading.official@gmail.com. I'm constantly sorting through the emails and adding new topics to the list of things to cover, so let me know what you would like to see. Have a great day, and remember, stay safe.